Grief does not follow a schedule. It doesn't read the self-help books that promise healing in 5 neat stages. Hello, my name is Astrid, and this is Unseen Light Podcast, where we are making the invisible visible. Today, we are exploring grief's long arc with Dr. Sheila Collins, internationally recognized authority on transforming loss. As both PhD psychotherapist with over 4 decades of experience and a former professional dancer, her award-winning books, including Warrior Mother and The Art of Grieving, have challenged conventional wisdom about loss. After experiencing profound personal tragedy, Sheila became a member of Women's Spirituality Group in East Texas for over 30 years. And she pioneered revolutionary methods combining movement, storytelling, and creative expression that has helped thousands transform their grief into unexpected gifts. Hello, Sheila. It's so lovely to have you here to talk about this quite heavy, but I would say very important topic. I would like to ask you, when it comes to grief, do you think there are some fundamental misunderstandings that we might have that can keep us trapped in actually seeing it in a way that could help us or help us transform or even move on?
Well, that's for sure, Astrid. This is what in my writing and in my own life, what my own life has been asking me to deal with. There's a lot I didn't know, even the fact that I had been a social worker, I had been a mental health professional, I'd been the head of a clinic at one point. But when I was there in the place of being the mom that was dealing with it, there was a lot of things that were different I hadn't been taught that. And whenever you have a topic that people don't talk about, you don't learn from other people either. That's one of the problems with things that are sort of taboo or we're not supposed to talk about. We can't educate each other if that's the case. So I think that is what happened. So what I think the shorthand way I describe it is, I think we've been taught in Western culture that grief is a time limited, like stair steps that we climb. And we have these different feelings, which is true. We can have, I think the steps are 5 or 6, but we could have, I don't know, 50 steps. I mean, there's so many various feelings you could have. But as you go up the steps and then you just get to the top and you just dust your hands off and you say, well, I'm done. Except it doesn't work that way. So then you feel kind of bad about yourself because it's not working that way. And so the way that the actual brain processes is more circular than that. So there's reminders that will bring us back to something that's happened. And one of my favorite stories in the book, The Art of Grieving, is a nun told me that she was in the grocery store and she just all of a sudden she's feeling just all this grief for her friend who had died recently. And she couldn't understand why that was happening. And then she looked over, she was in the bakery department and they had some mincemeat pies. And this was what triggered for her because her friend was the best baker of mincemeat pies. So she's in the grocery store crying about her friend and thinking, why is this happening to me now? Well, it's because something reminded her of her friend, and not in her conscious mind, but in this case, it was a scent. It was a scent of the
Scents are very strong memory triggers, aren't they?
Yes.
Do you think that people can then come to conclusion that if I'm not moving in these straight steps, but I seem to be like more sometimes running in circles, they might sometimes feel like, okay, I'm not progressing. I'm because it's not linear. They might have that linear expectations. Do you think that there might be some form of like even self-guilt, shame coming out of that circular movement?
I think definitely. Absolutely. Or this feeling of being crazy, I'm crazy. I'm, not understanding how the brain actually processes our experiences. And that is in the cover of my book. I have a spiral. I was going to grab it here to show you. I have the image of a spiral because this is really the way
Spiraling.
it works.
Yeah, spiral.
That
Yeah.
this is really the path that energy takes in everything, in the waves of the water, in the way that plants are formed. I mean, it's not, life is not linear, even though we try to make it. And so the notion is that it goes around, and our experiences go around with the seasons. So there's, there might be, someone has lost their father, he's died. And so they've gone through the funeral and all that, and everything seems to be in order. And then here comes Father's Day, or here comes their father's birthday. And so it takes you back. It takes you back to, but the gift of it is that you're not in the same place you were when it first happened. Now you're a little bit, you know, at a different angle from looking at it. And so
Oh,
maybe you're
yeah.
recognizing something about your father that you had not thought about. I have often said that in some ways I became closer to my mother after she died than I was certainly in the later years of her life, because she was ill and she wasn't available. She was struggling, and so she wasn't available. But after she died, it was almost magical in that, things would remind me of her and think of the things she would say. We would quote my mother, that sort of thing, come to see her from this different perspective, and
Oh.
take a more holistic look at her.
Oh, so you mean like it's like a tree when the tree loses the leaves every winter, but it's not the same tree like it was the last year. So just because you keep losing, let's say, the leaves every winter doesn't mean you're not growing as a tree, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. That's
Oh, that's
exactly.
beautiful. That yeah, I never thought about it in like a connection with seasons, but it makes a perfect sense. And do you think that sometimes this idea, because we all heard about the stages of grief, like what you should go through, do you think that sometimes the way how like people have it in their mind, how it should go, even like not just on yourself, you can be hard on yourself because of that, but maybe your environment, like maybe even your friends and family can sometimes have that idea too. Do you think it can somehow impact the people? I guess negatively. What do you think?
Oh, I think it absolutely impacts us. And also, when I wrote one of my books that I wrote was about my losses, and it was part of the way I processed, because I recognized that the arts are what help us process. So as I'm writing the stories, as I'm remembering them, as I'm trying to get clear about what actually happened, now I'm in a different relationship to what actually happened with my son and my daughter, because I lost two children when they were in their early adulthood. And so what I call it is, there's like, it's the long path of grieving, because it's not all the time. You go on with your life, it's fine. But then there'll be things that will remind you. And then eventually you really like to be reminded. You really, I
I
like
see.
I like to think about, somebody mentioned something about courage or something. And I said, well, when I think about courage, I think about my son who was diagnosed with AIDS when he was 27 years old. And he was so brave in terms of, make the best of what I can here. Don't miss anything here. And that notion, which is what, of course, loss does for us, or death does for us, is to recognize this we have now. This is what we have. I mean, we think we have more, but for sure, the only thing we can be certain of is now. So, what can we do now that would be helpful or important, or what do I want my life to be? So his notion was that he had to take care of himself so he could be there for the cure, because he knew there was going to be one. And he didn't quite make it. He was on the trial for the medications that eventually worked. We don't know which version he had, of course, but that hope kept him going. And that notion of, this is all I know about for sure, is now.
So you think that maybe one of the things that people can do is that instead of trying to avoid the triggers, because I would say a lot of people will have the first idea that they would have is, okay, I need to avoid the triggers to avoid the negative feelings. But that, as you mentioned, that's hard because then you go to supermarket, you just go on the street and something you can't really trigger free the world. So do you think that maybe transforming our reaction to the triggers, like you mentioned, turning them into something positive, like how we could do that? Is that a way how we can maybe deal with the triggers?
Well, I think first of all, recognizing that these things happen so you don't feel crazy, because it doesn't feel very good to feel crazy.
Yeah, I can imagine that happening if something like that happens. And while I'm feeling this in supermarket, I'm crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you, in fact, there's what I say to people is that we have a name for this. It's called a grief burst. That's the name of it, a grief burst. And you can be fine, and then all of a sudden, you're not fine. You're, in the sense, you're experiencing something, and to just recognize that, and to recognize also that you only have this because you love. You don't have this for the things you're glad they're over. You don't have that. It's only
No.
something that was really valuable or really important that you have your grief first.
That's a really lovely way how to look at it. I know that these outbursts can be sometimes really surprising because like you really don't think like, oh yeah, I think I'm fine, because you are able to function on a daily basis. But then this burst can literally come from, I know from my experience too, that can come from second to second. And the surprise just kind of, it sometimes feels like a reality check that, oh, I guess I'm not fine. So, what would you recommend to somebody who, let's say, didn't have this outburst in like a long while, and then something, because that can happen, right? They can sometimes be quite spread out. So, if this happened after a long time, and the person is just suddenly the reality of the fact that the grief is not gone, what would you recommend to somebody like that in stage like that to do?
Well, I now this may sound really odd, but stay with me for a minute here, because since this is the way it works, I mean, the way the brain works, and and the way energy travels, you can decide that you can use, let's say, music. You can purposefully decide that you want to visit that relationship or that person or that situation. And you can create something in the music that music will take you back immediately. In fact, that's one of the things that people get grief bursts about. Some stores have the music playing, or the elevator has the music playing, or you didn't turn on the music, it's just there, and then here it is. It's the music that was your favorite music, or connected to somebody in your life that's not with you anymore. So that works. I mean, and so but you can do it on purpose. So is what I mean. You can just really appreciate that this is someone you loved, or this was some time that was so important to you in your life, and how you want to revisit that and really experience it again. Because first of all, people have this notion that, if I start crying, I'm never going to stop, which is not true. I think you're only going to cry for maybe 2 minutes. I forget exactly, scientifically what it is, but it's not that long. So it doesn't have to be afraid of that you're going to be stuck back there in this horrible place. You're going to be in the place of appreciation. Tears come when something is like an underline. This is important. So, we get tears. A funny way it works. Sometimes we miss the person more when something good is happening than when something bad is happening. We're kind of glad they're not here to have to go through this with us, right?
Yeah.
They got a free ride here. We're having to deal with this. But when it's something really beautiful, and like, say, a wedding, and grandma didn't get to make it to the wedding. She died before the wedding. So then how do we bring grandmother in? How do we,
Mm.
sometimes we bring grandmother in by wearing something that she gave you, or we even say at the wedding, we want to lift our glasses to grandma, because she knew that this was going to happen. She just didn't get to stay here for it. So, you know, to bring her in, because we do stand on her shoulders, or we do appreciate our ancestors. Otherwise, we wouldn't even be here.
Oh, that's so lovely. I really like the kind of turning the grief kind of more into like nostalgia,
Mm-hmm.
transforming it, heading like going towards it rather than running away from it. But I would like to ask, because sometimes grief does not come alone. Sometimes it comes with things like guilt, shame, self blaming, and I think in a lot of cases also feeling deep sense of unfairness. That what happened, this what happened, that was not unfair, and I feel also not just grief but also anger because I feel that was unfair. Do you think there is like a good way how to deal, let's say, with the feeling of that wasn't fair? That can be really sometimes like burning inside.
Well, yes, there's a lot of good ways. And And I'll give you a very specific example. So in the United States, there was a woman, this is about 25 years ago, whose daughter was killed by a drunk driver. Now, this was horrible. And I can't remember, she was young. She was probably in high school at the time. So she uses her anger, and this is not fair. Nobody would think this was fair. She uses her anger to start an organization and to concertedly go after the laws that allow people to get in a car when they're drunk and kill somebody. Now it's 25 years later, and so this was not a fast little thing that she accomplished. And she had to take a lot of other people to be on this page with her, but she was determined in honor of her daughter to change the laws in the different states and different areas about people getting their driver's license and being able to do this. And a lot of things had to happen, even changing the way that the records are kept and communicated, because somebody could be in one area and they had this record and they could keep their license, they could lose their license and be in some other area and they're fine, so it was not a small thing, but it was a great demonstration of wanting to change the world so that it's not going to happen to other people and it becomes a gift to the
Because,
world.
yeah, you're right. Because if I think about it, even the feeling of unfairness or the anger, that's a fire. And fire is still passion. The fire can fuel something. I guess it's really up to us what we are choosing to use that fire for. If we choose it to let us let us burn to coal, or if we are channeling it into something. But I guess that really would require quite a lot of self-awareness to be able to channel these feelings into something creative and productive, because some
Well,
things.
but I think it happens quite often. It's amazing, really. I know when I moved to a different city after my son died of AIDS, and at that time there was starting to be the drugs to help people. It wasn't a death sentence anymore. And so a lot of kids were just very irresponsible about, not, well, don't worry about it, there's medicine kind of thing. Well, that's not really the way to look at life. So there was
Hmm.
an organization that was working with teenagers on educating them about HIV/AIDS. So I thought, okay, I think I'm going to go to that. I'm going to be a volunteer and I'm going to do something to present to these kids, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to explain to them that about my son, and I'm going to say, as his mother, I'm going to tell him what he would tell you. I would tell you what he would tell you if he were here. So it was a way to bring the wisdom that my son has now after having had AIDS, and the drugs and all that. So, and these kids were like, oh, they were taking pictures. That we got through to them. We got through to them because I could speak with a kind of authority that other people didn't have.
And I guess they understood, like, you're also talking from experience. You're not just somebody who is talking because they read it in the books, or somebody who does not understand, has a very just theoretical understanding of the situation. It has a bigger impact, more weight, if you actually come with an actual experience, lived experience.
Exactly.
Yeah, that can sometimes get through to people when other things just can't. I
Right.
know that you were r/are a dancer, which
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
absolutely lovely. And So I would like to ask you, as a dancer who is obviously aware of your body, because that's what you do when you dance, do you think that grief can sometimes impact your body when, for example, when you're suppressing your grief, or can grief also show in your body, not just, let's say, in your mind or in your trigger reactions?
Well, yes. In fact, our memories our our memories live in our bodies. So when we move our bodies, we connect to our memories. And also, what can happen, one of the worst things in life is to be stuck.
Hmm.
You're stuck. You can't move. You can't go anywhere. You can't get any new ideas. It's like, and so if you move, you know, if you move physically, it starts to open you up. It starts more oxygen, more, and you begin to access information that you didn't have when you were just sitting here. And yeah, so I've been fascinated actually by the power of dance. And by the way, in many cultures, they have music. At a funeral, they'll have music. Some cultures have dance. Almost all cultures have storytelling, the stories of the person, the people that we knew. If you knew the person, you would tell different stories than I would tell. And putting all those stories together, we get a more fuller picture of that person, of who they really were, of who, so I love that notion. And I think that's the way the arts, what my experience has taught me is that it's the arts, the imaginal mind, the not the conscious, figure it out math side of the brain, but this other side of the brain, which is music, which is dance, which is story, that is really the processing. And that's really how we can transform what our life is been.
And when somebody starts, let's say, working with for grief with the dance, and they start dancing, is it possible that the person would further dance, like have some form of like a burst and like a burst release of emotions? Does it happen that somebody like dance and then suddenly like maybe they start to cry, or like things start to come up like spontaneously? Is it something that happens?
Absolutely.
Oh wow.
And the really magical part, at least for the dance part, is the gift of dance is joy. That's what it is. So if you can dance, if you can move it, and like I say, it changes your breathing, it can bring in. I have an activity I do with people sometimes where I say, okay, all right, we've been talking about grief or whatever it is. Okay, your body's heard all of that but there's a part of your body that's smarter than you are. So let's check in with that part. And so what I tell people to do is just move however your body wants to move, because bodies love to move, even though we sit a lot, but bodies love to move. And then just wait and see what comes to you. And it could be an image, could be a memory, could be a quote, could be, I don't know, but something will come.
Oh, wow.
So, like when I just did that, I think what came to me was sort of memories of seeing people kind of light up with this information from themselves.
Oh
I
wow.
didn't tell them what it was, but they found their body revealed something to them that they didn't have consciously up here. Obviously, they knew it somewhere. In some way, they knew it, but it wasn't accessible to them. So that's the use of the arts, really, that I'm going to be presenting at a conference, International Expressive Arts Therapy Conference in Boston in June. And this is an organization, people who use the arts to help people understand themselves better, and get information from a part of themselves. So, we know that children do this they draw pictures of their family, and then you ask them, well, tell me the story of your pictures. What is your picture? And then they access that. But it comes first with something you do. It's something you actually do.
Oh yeah, that's that wow, that makes a lot of sense. So you think that let's say the body and expression and the dance, it can be a solution, let's say, for people who have a very, very suppressed grief, and something that is just really even hard to access through even the talking therapies, because some people just say, oh, I don't have a problem, and they will insist on not having a problem even though clearly like there is a problem. Do you think like the movement and the dance can help with something like that, like suppress grief?
Well, I think, first of all, I want to say sometimes it's good to have suppressed grief. This is
Oh,
not a
okay.
bad. Okay. So like, okay, everybody is not as expressive as everybody else. Some people are, they talk with their hands and and some people are more, smaller movements, slower. The example I would use is men who are going through war. They do not stop to grieve. There's no stopping here. You keep doing, you keep till you get to the other side, right? So that's in life. That is the model I like to think about, is kind of the concept of two things. First, I want to process what has happened, my losses, but I also want to continue living my life and taking care of myself and my children or my job, So it's two pronged. And so the notion, it's not either or. And so, but sometimes you can give yourself the opportunity to grieve. And then you can, like I said, I don't know, it lasts a few minutes. It's not a long thing. And then you'll feel better, you'll feel relieved maybe, and then you can get your job done, or you can do what needs to be done next. And always back and forth between those two things.
You mentioned that we tend to sit a lot. Do you think that somehow maybe because we sit a lot behind computers and we don't, I would say we are the most sedentary we've ever been in the history of humankind. Do you
Maybe,
think like
yeah.
that maybe it does have like a negative impact on us processing emotions like anxiety, depression, grief, because we just tend to sit a lot? Do you think there was a connection?
Oh, I do. I think it's really, Astrid, I think there's a huge connection. I've seen some research on sitting is the new smoking in terms of a threat to our health. So, people have stopped smoking, thank goodness. I mean, there's still a few people that do, but it's not something that's going on all the time like it used to. But what we're also doing is all this sitting. So I have a watch that tells me it's time to stand up. So I like that. I like that because I can get too focused on something. That's not good. So it's time to walk around, take a walk outside, be outside. That's another thing. Be connected to nature. Grieving is a natural thing. It's nature. There's everything dies in the winter and my garden looks awful. And then in the spring it starts to come up again. And that's a
That's
good
lovely.
to see. That's a good thing to be reminded of.
I really like how you're connecting healing of the grief with creativity and with art. But I would say sometimes people have a lot of fear around doing art. Like they feel, oh, I don't know how to draw. Let's say I don't know how to dance. I don't know how to sing. I would like to do it, but I'm not good at it. So how you, let's say when you're working with people, how you helping them to, let's say, overcome this fear of like, I can't do that. I'm not good at it.
Well, I really feel like where that problem comes from, partly, no matter where we live, we have access through the computers and all of this. We have access to the people who are exquisite at what they do. I mean, and I remind people when I was making my living as a dancer, I danced 8 or 9 hours a day. Now, you would get kind of good at something if you did it for 8 or 9 hours a day, right? So it's not fair for you or anyone to compare themselves to a person who's been doing it many years and for that many, like I'm not as good as they are, so I can't do it. But I think that's partly where that comes from, besides the fact that we we tend to look at art as entertainment or something extra rather than something that is really a survival skill, that is really to express and not carry things in our bodies rigidly. I think it's about health and really being able to have happiness is the notion of that. So yeah, so I think I think we have to be realistic. And so here's another thing that is very interesting to me. Sometimes people that are studied at something, let's say a musician or let's say a dancer, they that those arts may not serve them for this purpose as well as something you don't do well, because you can always hide behind your technique.
I see. Yeah.
And so you're not really self revealing. But if I start drawing, I'm going to be self revealing because I don't have any technique at all. My technique is, I don't know. So I'm just going to be, and something is going to emerge. And I'm going to look at that and I'm going to say, wonder what that's saying to me. It's saying something about me. And so I'm getting information about myself. And of course, if you were with a professional would be doing that. They would be looking at what is really being revealed here. But I think we can all do that. We can all do it.
I have a thought-provoking question. Do you think that there is just certain type of beauty that can only be created from grief or the sense of devastation?
I think there is a relationship for sure. I think that there is a way that people in the grief world think about it. So there's this carving out, this emptying out of something in us when we have lost deeply something that we love. And so that's devastating. Yet after a time, as it goes, we now have more capacity. We just appreciate life more because we know how bad it can get sometimes. I mean, look at us. We're here and this is great. You know what I'm saying? We really appreciate that, somebody's not firing on us right now. We're not in, the ceiling isn't falling in. If you've had that experience, you really appreciate it.
Oh, I do. Yeah, I agree. I know a few artists myself, and the truth is that the best artists that have some of the best works I know that they do that really touches other people comes from not the technique, like you said, but from personal experience. These people went through something. They are using it as an expression. Hey there, taking a quick moment to thank you for joining us on Unseen Light podcast, where we are making the invisible visible, one conversation at a time. If you are enjoying our honest, straightforward approach to spiritual topics, I would love for you to follow us wherever you are getting your podcasts. And for those wanting to go deeper, check the notes for links to our certified online courses designed to help you navigate your spiritual journey with clarity and purpose. And now, back to our conversation. I remember you mentioned the thing about the form and how sometimes the people who are professional artists can be too focused on the form. Do you mean that basically the way how people should use the art as expression is more like children do it, because children just express themselves. They don't care if other people can draw or not, right?
The word I would use is play.
Playing. Yeah.
Playing, and it is a child word, but we can all play if we have the courage to play. What is the saying? You don't grow old because you grow old because you stop playing. So, but that notion of newness, that of a discovery, of curiosity. I mean, what can you do with a crayon? What can you do with a pencil? What can you do with your voice? What can you? And doing it with other people too, the connection is really something that we long for, I think, in the cultures now. I mean, we've lost some of that sitting around the fire telling stories. We don't have as much of that experience. So yeah, it is that playfulness, that experimenting. Let's just see what we can make here.
I would like to actually also ask you, because you mentioned it, that's such a great idea, having people you can share this with. But I would say not in every single case. Let's say your environment and your family will have the perfect reaction. Sometimes you expect when something like that happened, them saying something supportive or just saying something, but in not every case, the people have a perfect reaction. Sometimes the reaction is quite like damaging. They might not be outright rude, but they just say something that's just like so out of place. So, how do you deal with the fact when your own community is maybe not that supportive or not supportive the right way? How you search for a different community?
I think we're really in those times right now where people are so divided. And part of what I believe is happening is that people are getting different information. So we now have algorithms that are going to show you something. If you Google a topic, they're going to show you some information. If I do it, they may show me some different information based on other searches we've made or made on how old we are or what country we're in. I don't know, all this algorithm deal. But so we're hungry, I believe, for connection. We're hungry for it. And we aren't finding it often in our own families or even our own neighborhoods if these people are already separated. I mean, when I hear what some people have read, I don't even, I mean, it's just amazing to me. Are we on the same planet? Can we be on the same planet? That's what I want to know. So we're looking for ways to come together. And yes, also grieving is not something that we just do by ourselves. It really is a communal experience. And when we have that, one of the things I started doing was doing what I called it performing my books. So, when you have a book, sometimes you read something from your book and then as a presentation to people, and they ask you questions about it and that kind of thing. Well, what I started doing was I have a improv troupe that practices improvisational storytelling. So I read something from my book, and then they use, and we call a form, maybe it's a movement form, a story form, a singing form, and they create something in the moment that responds to what I've read.
Oh,
Because in
that's nice.
because in some ways we all have the same life, really. I mean, we're not that different. It comes right to the heart of how we're the same. And so it's very exciting and fun. Well, when this happens and people are there, then they start telling their stories to each other, and then they don't want to leave because it's really fun. So even though they're talking about things that are sometimes, or challenging or difficult, it feels good to be able to. I mean, one of the things I do when someone tells me that they have had a loss, I say, "What is the name of your mother? What is her name? What is your daughter's name?" And we say that name, and it brings that person present to us, not something to run from.
Even the name can be sometimes even difficult to say. I think that sometimes when people grieve somebody's lost, then they sometimes even avoid saying the name, or because names have power, right? So yeah, when that happened, or kind of not saying it, afraid to saying it, you're recommending people to really try to go towards the grief and see where it leads them. Do you feel that maybe the grief can transform you in a way that maybe other things can't? Do you think it's like an initiation that nobody really asked for but can be really profound?
Well, yeah, I think we always want the pill that doesn't taste too bad, or the medicine that doesn't taste too bad, right? Yeah, we always want it easy, but a lot of times it's the hard. It's We're tested in the hard times. We're tested in those times, and I always think about, if you wrote a book about a character that never had any challenges, what would be interesting about that? Not very
Nobody
much.
would read that. Nobody would read that.
It would be boring, because we want to see how people grapple and who they become. Who does this character become? Because they had this. When I think of my children, I think of who they became during the process that they went through. That was so. Of course, as a mother, I would not want them to have that, right? No, I don't want this. We did not order this. We do not want this, but it's here. And so it's in the acceptance of that, as this is what life is asking of me, that we use our creativity to live the best life we can live in that circumstance. And it takes us places we would never imagine we could go.
Be your own hero in your own book.
Right.
Write your own
Exactly.
book and be your own hero. And I guess it's up
Yeah.
to you where this hero story is going to lead you.
Yeah.
That's
and
beautiful.
and we're in it together. It's not just the single person, charging ahead. We're in this together, and what we want is the connection with others.
That's beautiful. Well, you are actually out there. You do public speeches, and you also wrote the books. So, can you tell us more about the books that you wrote and where people can potentially find you?
Yes. Well, the first book I wrote was on self-care, and it was probably you were probably too young to have read this book, I'm sure, but at that time, to be concerned about taking care of yourself was considered selfish,
Oh
especially
yeah,
for women. You're supposed to be dedicating everything to everyone else.
especially as a woman. Yeah,
Yeah, especially as a woman. I think that's right. And then of course, so you're thinking of everyone else, like you're martyring yourself. So that was not good. So trying to, so the first book, but I'm so glad that that was my first book, because even though it wasn't well received initially, what has happened to that book, it's for caregivers, it's for people who are either professional caregivers, like social workers, and helper types in their jobs, or people who have take care of children, take care of elders, mostly women in many cultures. But then what about ourselves? Because when we don't take care of ourselves, we're not any good for anybody. So
Mm.
it's not really, a selfish thing. Anyway, so in 2018, I redid the book because people said there's so many more caregivers now. So I redid it, and I did it with a younger woman who knows about, all this techie stuff and social media. And so that was a good partnership. And Christine Gautreau is her name. And we still work together. And so we were going around the country doing presentations for this book. And then we were shut down March of 2020. That's it.
Oh
We're
yeah.
not going
Mm.
anywhere. We're not going anywhere. Your life is going to be on this little screen. That's it. So she said, well, we can put this on. We can put this on. So I said, oh, what we do is not going to work on screen. It's sure of it. I was just totally sure. Of course, I'm so glad I was totally wrong because we're still doing it 5 years later. Once a week, we have people coming online using this book, Still Point, and it's called A Self-Care Playbook. Again, that play
Yeah,
notion,
the creativity play. Yeah.
activity of play for caregivers to find ease and time to breathe and reclaim joy. So 5 years we've been meeting once a week. And when we did it, I love to tell this part because we said, well, people are going to need this because of the COVID and all that. And then so many times, even now, we say, boy, did I need that. So the giving is the getting. I mean, when you're giving that to someone, that that it comes back. You can't not get it back. So that
Those
was the first.
the self-care, actually, if you that's actually very weird thinking about it, that self-care really is become more like a major topic only like past few years. I would say only recently that it become like actually something that people talk about. I think that we have, or we had, I think that's changing, this idea of the saint martyr, like you said,
Yeah,
that it's the right thing to do, like not to take care of yourself, putting yourself aside and just the one, like that's the saint, right? That's what the saint does. They sacrifice themselves.
right.
But you can only take for as long as you can take before like recharging. Like at
Our
some point you
body.
will stop be able to give because there's simply
That's right.
nothing to
Exactly.
give left. So yeah, I would say, oh, even like I would say, the dealing with grief. Do you feel like there is a connection? Let's say, for example, somebody who has hard time with self care will have a hard time with grief
Yes.
processing.
Astrid, absolutely. That's why I said I was so glad that the first book I did was on self care and how important. And then when it came around to looking at grief, yes, we come back to we need to care for ourselves. If we can't, we can only accept the love from other people when we're in a place where we care about ourselves.
You need to
It's
love yourself first.
Yeah, it's kind of a tricky thing. So yeah. So then the next book I did was Warrior Mother. And that book is Warrior Mother, Fierce Love, Unbearable Loss, and the Rituals That Heal. And that book took me quite a long time because I was processing both of those losses of my daughter and my son, and then also my best friend. I mean, I went through a lot of accompanying people through difficult, challenging illnesses and deaths. And then that's when I recognized so much about learning from that, and so much that we were told that is not true. It's just not true. So we have to unlearn. We have to unlearn. I even figured out where that came from, that notion. Freud was So much of the Western world was based in Freud. I studied Freud, of course, and he actually had a loss of a daughter during the first COVID, during 100 years ago. And he decided that the best thing to do is just keep working and, you know, don't, just keep going, just
Mm.
keep going. And so so that became the way that the stair step model kind of came from that, instead of the notion later on in the 60s, when the development of the notion of this way the brain works, and the notion of how we process, and that notion of things coming back, and even wanting to go back and bring it into the present, that wisdom from then to now. So then The Art of Grieving, and that's the one I just did this year. So that's the third book, The Art of Grieving, How Art and Art Making Help Us Grieve and Live Our Best Lives.
The links will be under this show, so you can go and definitely check her stuff. So if you should like sum up dealing with grief in like one sentence, how would you sum it up?
Well, I use the word gift, and that it is that the grief, the ability to grieve, and the opportunity to grieve, is really a gift. Because remember, I consider it the processing of loss, but processing of the gains as well. Because there's no loss without gain, and there's no gains without loss. So
That's
it's
beautiful.
connected. Yeah.
Everything in the life comes with price tag, doesn't it?
Yes.
Thank you for your beautiful and kind words. Thank you for coming to this show. Hope everybody loved our show as much as I did. There's going to be, again, links for everything Sheila does in the comment section below. My name is Astrid. This is Unseen Light Podcast. Let your unseen light shine, and I'm going to see you in our next show.